All right, so today I want to go over the walk cycle. That way, if you get done with the poses and they're rendering out another computer or whatever, you can start the walk cycle, or at least start thinking about it. Before I do, I'm going to show this. This was something that a student asked me, how would you animate something like this? And so you can see the idea with this is that there's that kind of wobbly table, and then there's a ball rolling on the inside of it. And so it looks like the ball is actually like lifting it up. It's not, it's all fake. But this is how I attacked this problem. So this is something very easily that you could try to animate, and it would be a lot of keyframes to get it to work, and it wouldn't turn out very nicely. So what I did was I rigged it. So using some simple-ish expressions, the top of this top, which is this thing here, oops, I just hid my expressions. There it is done by using a sine and cosine wave. If you don't remember what a sine wave is from math class, this is what a sine wave is. And then a cosine wave is that, okay? So what happens is when you take a sine wave and a cosine wave and you put them together, it actually creates a circle, which is kind of neat in how they animate. Just to show that alone, just so you can see that I'm not lying in this case. I know you guys all think I'm a liar. All right, so that's P sphere 2. So, oops. So P sphere 2 dot translate Z. I'm going to make this equal to, oops, the sine of time. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to make a sine wave, which is a wave, it's going to fluctuate between -1 and 1. That's all it's going to do. And with time inside here, it's going to go pretty slow. Okay, so I'm going to hit edit. And then I'm going to hit play. Now this is also going to go, let me just isolate this so we can ignore the rest of it. It's also going to go very short distance because it's only under the sine of time. It's going from -1 to +1. So it's only going like back and forth very slowly. So let's say that I took this sine of time, blah, 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 and I just multiplied that by 10. Now it'll go from -10 to +10. So there it goes. Woo. All right. And instead of this being time, I'm going to set this to time times 10. And what this will do is basically go 10 times faster. Okay? So everything inside, everything inside here is how fast it's going to go. Everything outside here is the distance, like how far it's going to go. Okay? So if I hit play now, that's way too fast. Set that to 6 maybe. There we go, that's better. Okay, so that's what the sine of time does. It just goes back and forth, okay? If I change this to cosine, it's going to look pretty much the same, okay? But they're actually like on opposite schedules. So when sine is at +1, cosine is at -1, and so on. So they kind of like alternate. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to change this to the sine of time, and I'll change this to translate x. So now we get a circle, okay? So that's how it's actually like rotating, is the rotation for it, the rotate x and rotate z are kind of working together to create that, that topply kind of movement. So that's all I did to animate this one. And then the ball on the inside, I did a group. And all that happens is the group just rotates around in a circle. That's all it's doing. So that ball on the inside is just rotating all the way around it. I didn't set any keyframes there as well because I wanted to link everything together. So with that one, I took that group's rotate y, and I told it to be equal to the frame times 7.2 plus 95. Now the 7.2, this is a number that basically I got by figuring out how long it takes for it to go all the way around in one circle. And then let's say it took, I think it was 15 frames, something like that. So I took 360 divided by 15 frames, I got 7.2-ish, and then that's where I got this number. And then the plus 95 is just an offset because it didn't line up perfectly. So if I just set it there, you'll see it's like stuck in the middle. So then just add 95. And that got it pretty perfect. Okay, so that rotates it around. And then I added another expression to the sphere's rotate z, so that as it's spinning around in the circle, it actually like rolls. And so if I don't like how fast it's rolling, I could just change this number here to, let's say, 15. And now it's going to roll a bit quicker, okay? The movement is all the same on the top part. It's the same going around, but as far as the ball like rotating itself, that part is now a little bit quicker, okay? So even though these things we're using for rigging a character, you can definitely use them for these kinds of like neat little pieces. There's a whole bunch of stuff if you look at animation. Oops. The way things move. Nope, work. Right? So here is like an example of a sewing machine. I shouldn't even be curious about this, but I've always wondered, like, how does a sewing machine work? Because the needle goes in and somehow it gets tied up. And so there's actually an animation of this. That's obviously not it. There it is. Maybe that's it. Nope. There it goes. It just wasn't playing. So that's how a sewing machine works. That's pretty amazing. So there's like on this thing, and it just loops it around, and then this one goes down and it catches it. It's pretty awesome. Someone thought of that, right? Machines. Here's another one for like pistons and how pistons work. Here's another one. Okay, so doing these kinds of things, it makes your job a lot easier if you can figure out mathematically or rigging-wise how all of these things function, because it makes your life easier. Because if you can set this up to be rigged, that means your job is that much easier because you don't have to worry about moving this thing in and out while this thing is trying to follow that, while this thing is rotating, while the other stuff is doing that, and then the other side is doing that. I could rig this entire thing so that all I would have to do is hit play, and both the pistons would be going in and out, these things would be spinning, everything would be lined up perfectly. Okay? Where was that other one? Machine piston. There was one that I found that was, and search sewing machine again now. Yeah, stuff like this is pretty cool. There it goes. Now some of this could be like dynamic too. So I could actually do dynamics inside Maya. So I could actually build a device like this and hit play. And the only thing I've animated is maybe that circle spinning. And then the rest of these little arms are actually dynamic, and they actually would fall with gravity and interact like they're doing. I can't find it in here. They moved it. Simple machines. Wow. There we go. That's what I want. Mechanisms is a key word. Like this kind of stuff, like that's awesome. So every time this one spins around once, this one spins around 1/6 of a time, right? Yep, 1/6 of a time. That's pretty cool. There's also this thing. I actually have like a wooden, like real life version of this thing where you literally just like crank this and it does. Like the thing goes back and forth. It's all lined up perfectly. It's amazing. So that's part of all the rigging animation stuff. Today I'm going to go over the walk cycle. By the time you're done, this is what you should have, is a walk cycle of your character from the side view and the front view. And you're going to put those inside of After Effects so that we can see from the front view and the side view what the character looks like. Okay? That way we can see, I don't know why it like locks up right after he does one cycle. Hold on. Whatever. Let me turn that off. Make sure that's on full. Yes. That way we can see what it looks like from the front and the side, because those are the two most important views when you're looking at a walk cycle. We want to make sure that the hips are moving correctly, the shoulders are moving correctly, the feet, everything. Okay? So it starts off with your ready to pose pose. And I'm going to go through, I'm not going to do a step-by-step of this. I'm going to go through a process by process, okay? That way you're not watching me do the same thing over and over and over again. So process-wise, first thing I want to do is not type in process-wise. I want to type in WalkCycle reference. So WalkCycle reference is always a good thing to have. If you can find this one, this is the one I use because it is a really good reference for kind of exaggerating these poses. Some of these are okay, but it just gets kind of cluttery when you look at some of the stuff together, okay? Again, not difficult to see. So I like that one. YouTube also has a bunch of videos that look like this. It's just walking reference, which are good because they do show a person walking. And you can actually see like slow motion, double speed, women walking, men walking. There's even like drunk walking and angry walking. So they have a lot of different walk references, okay? So for this one, I'm going to use this. We're creating a basic, just simple walk cycle, just so you can see how we would do something like this. The purpose for doing this is, let's say that you're doing a character and you want them to walk from one side of the room to the other. It makes more sense to make a walk cycle and then just loop that walk cycle to have them walk across the room, okay? Or if you're doing a video game, every single action in a video game is broken down into some sort of cycle. So when your character walks, that's a walk cycle. When he runs, there's a run cycle. When he jumps, there's a jump cycle, okay? Everything they do is based on a cycle. So we have to make sure that we have a start point and an end point. In this case, because we have a looping function like a walk, we need to make sure that the start and the ends line up. And you'll see that the start picture here and the end picture there look exactly the same. And then because this is a walk where we're symmetrical, the middle pose would also be the same. And if you look at the poses that are in here, you'll actually see that the start and end are the exact same thing. The middle is opposite, so the opposite legs and opposite arms are forward. And then the same thing with these. These poses here, these three of them, are the same as these, but they're opposite sides. That's all it is. So if you can get the major poses and then you start working your way in, it becomes like 10 times easier to do. All right, so we're going to keep that. We're also not going to focus on the entire body at once. That's a huge undertaking to try to do. You want to focus on just the legs, get just the legs to work. Once the legs are cool, then you move on to the arms and upper body. Once that's cool, then you can move on to the neck and the head and the whatever else, okay? So first thing I want to do is I want to use my character set. So in this one, I'm going to use Andy. So I'm not going to choose the Andy character set. I'm going to choose lower body because, again, I'm focusing on just the lower body. Now, my first thing I want to do is set up the first pose. So what I do is I look at this pose here, and just like when we did our poses, or just like you're doing right now with your poses, you start from the center and you work your way out, okay? So the first thing I need to do is get the hips in position. Now this website, I don't know what happened to the guy's actual website. Maybe it's back up again? No. All right, he has a bunch of walk cycles on here apparently. He used to have one that was just like basically like the entire walk cycle with this. I don't know if they have the other ones. No. So basically what's happening here is pick a foot, doesn't matter which one. One of these feet are going to be forward eventually. But more importantly, the hips have to be positioned. If I take the foot here and I push this out like that, that's obviously unnatural. I also need to turn my stretchiness off. There we go, like that and like that. Okay. So this foot is forward, but obviously that foot can't be hitting the ground because the hips are not lined up right. Okay. So I'm going to take the hips. I'm going to nudge them down a little bit. I'm going to move them forward a little bit. And whichever leg is forward, that's the hip that gets rotated forward. Okay. When you walk, do an exaggerated walk, put your hands on your hips and feel that you can actually feel your hips like swaying like pretty obviously. Cool. I'm also going to take the knee and position that forward on both of these because that looks kind of weird. And then I'm going to take this foot and I'm going to position it forward. Now I'm going to look at, let me get that picture back. I'm going to look at what the foot looks like. So whichever foot is forward, you'll see that he's basically on the heel of his foot. So that's something that I need to make sure that I have is that whichever foot is forward is on the heel. Whichever foot is backwards is not on the heel, it's on the ball of the foot, and the heel is raised. So I'm going to go over here. I know Andy's controls pretty well, so I know that if I go to toe roll, or sorry, ball roll, nope, it was toe roll. Nope, it was foot roll. There we go. If I go to foot roll, you'll see that his foot rolls just like that, and I can push this back a little bit more. And then on this one, I can do the same one. If I go to foot roll and go this way, he goes on his heel. Every rig does not do that. Some rigs you have to do different things. Some rigs you would use the rotate for this. Now I don't like to use rotate because it actually like puts his foot in the ground, whereas the foot roll will actually keep the heel right in the ground, which is again awesome. Okay, so I'm going to push this forward. I'm going to keep in mind where his hips are in relationship to his foot. So if we're looking at this pose right here, where do you think all of his weight is at right now? Right, about to land on his left foot. So he probably has an equal distribution of weight, the heel and his toes, right? Maybe a little bit more on the back toes, but probably not. He's actually probably has a bit more on the front. So the hips here should be just slightly forward, probably a bit more than center. And you can see how slightly I move that. Okay, so that looks like a fine first pose for Andy's walk cycle here. There we go. So now I'm going to hit S to set a key. Because I'm on lower body, I don't have to have anything selected. I can hit S and it sets a key for everything that I've set up inside that character set. Okay, that's one of the reasons that we set this up. Because I need to make sure that everything gets keyed. All of these controls down here, all of these, and the hips. Then I'm going to go to the end of my animation. I didn't even set up that yet. So I'm going to go to 60 frames. 60? That's way too long. I'm going to go 30 frames. There we go. That's better. And at the end of my 30 frames, I'm going to take this foot. Oops, sorry. This is the end of my cycle, so he should be in the same spot, so I just set another key. There we go. Then I'm going to go to 15 frames, and 15 should be the opposite. So you'll see how I just swap these. Okay, and then I can just adjust the foot roll here, come back to this, adjust the foot roll there. And then because the hips are going to be rotated, I swap the rotation on the hips. And I think the feet probably need to come just a bit more forward or back. I guess like that. Sweet. All right, so now I can hit play and watch this. So you'll see right away, I only have 3 keyframes set, and it looks like an okay enough walk cycle for, shuffling, I guess. So then the next phases of this is going to be to go through and start setting up these other keyframes. So I'm going to do it in the same way each time. I'm going to start off with the hips and work my way outwards, basically hips down to the knees and then down to the feet. So looking at this one, I don't want to go to this one because then I have to also set this one up and then that one, and that makes my job a bit harder. If I go to the middle one here, then this one and that one are pretty much already set up. It's just tweaking at that point, okay? So if I go to passing, and I'm only going to do the first one, you can figure out the other one yourself. I'm going to first make sure that I have the correct foot. So the blue foot is the one that's moving forward. This is going to be my passing foot. So this one, the head is about the same height. If the head's at the same height, that means the hips are at the same height, okay? Both legs are in about alignment, so that should mean that the hips are perfectly squared off. And then it looks like that this knee is just bent, okay? So if I grab the controller for the hips, a little bit of rotation. This is the foot that's sliding forward, so this one is going to come up. And there shouldn't be any foot roll on this at this point. And I may want to do a little bit of rotation on here and move this slightly forward. Okay, so I'm going to hit S to set a key there. So now I get this. Oops. I only had the one thing selected, and that's why it set a key just on the one thing, so let me just reset that keyframe. There we go. So it says result 36, so that way I know. Okay. So now his foot comes up, and then it touches down. Okay? Now what I would do is I would go to the other foot and do the same thing. I would set up that middle pose of that one. I would go to 22, 23 and set up that pose. Then I'm going to go to the middle of this. So I'm going to go to recoil, and I'm going to set this up. Again, kind of cutting this in half, figuring out what's happening to this foot, and then going from there. One thing that people forget to do, the reason that the foot is bent here is because his foot was on the ground and it's like this. The second his foot comes off the ground, his toes wouldn't be pushed down anymore. So the second he lifts off the ground, those toes should now be straight. So I'm going to take that foot roll off, like so. I'm going to rotate this slightly. I'll also notice that his hips are down, so I need to take this and push this down a bit. Maybe move it forward slightly. You'll also notice that this foot is firmly planted. So no foot roll on this one. And how far off? That looks pretty good. Okay, so I'm going to set a key on this. So now we go from here, like that. So now I'm going to go back to this point at 11. Take the foot roll off. Look at what this looks like. Oops, this point, high point. And just kind of push that up. His head is at his highest point here. So that means his hips have come up a bit. His back foot is still on the floor, which it is right there, which is fine. Oops, he's doing like a little kick or something. I don't know what's going on there. And then I'll set a key here. There we go. So now you can see this foot comes up, and then it stomps down. Okay, so that's looking like a pretty decent walk for that one side. So I do the same thing on the other side, okay? You want to go through and tweak it. You want to look at things like the hips. You want to look at things like the knees, which way they're pointing. Look at it from different angles too, because if I look at it from this angle, you can see that Andy's knees are like crazy messed up, okay? Because when I went to 15 and I set this keyframe, I never moved the knees over. They should be about there. Actually, when you walk, you're a little bit bow-legged. So your knees should actually be out like this a bit. Okay. Now I could go here and set a key on this one. Go to 11. Just adjust that. Go to 7. Adjust that. Or I can go into the graph editor and do it here. So if I just look at the translate X, this is where they are at the beginning. This is where they are, or sorry, the beginning here. This is where they are at the end. This is where they are in the middle. I can just delete the middle keyframes and let the software just kind of figure out what they're supposed to be doing. There you go. So I'm just looking at that one leg, so that's good enough. Cool. So then I would work on this until I'm happy with both sides. I get the left foot, I get the right foot, everything's cool. Then I would jump to upper body, and I would work on the upper body. And again, I would look at what the upper body is doing. If your hips are facing one direction, your shoulders are facing the opposite direction, okay? If your left foot is forward, your right arm is going to be forward, your right shoulder is going to be forward. So in this case, at the very beginning, Andy is facing like this. So I'm going to rotate all of this stuff, not just the one, but all of these, so that Andy's shoulders are facing the opposite direction. Okay, they don't have to be as extreme, but they definitely need to be more than they were. Maybe a little bit here, maybe this one should be rotated back some. And you'll kind of get an idea too as you're doing this as to what's going to look good. Sometimes you'll grab the wrong controller and Andy starts to or your rig starts to stretch out in a weird way. Like that, okay. And then I'm going to lower his arm. Oops, that's the shoulder, or the collarbone. I'll lower this arm, there we go. And lower that arm. And Andy's shoulder is really blocky, so I'm just going to just give the shoulder blades a little bit of a dip. And then pull these out. Now I'm using for this FK, I'm not using IK, because when I animate the arms, it's easier just to rotate that one shoulder joint to create it versus trying to create a nice swing with an IK handle. Come on. Andy also has these like hands that are like really weird. It's kind of a good spot now before I set any keyframes to get them in kind of a somewhat relaxed pose. Right? Or an angry pose, apparently. Andy's angry. There we go. I'll do the same thing here. Oops. Let's take the thumb out of that one. Just do that one separate. There we go. All right. So that's good. All right, so it's kind of in front, which is where I want that to be. So I'm going to set a key at the beginning. I'm going to go to the end, set a key, and then I'm going to go to the middle and swap it. Okay, this is what it looks like when your shoulders and hips are rotating the same direction. Obviously not right. So we'll rotate these the other way, and then we'll switch arms. So all I have to do is just rotate this arm backwards. Maybe straighten it out a little bit. It's too much. And then come up here. And that should be good. So I'm going to set a key on there. So now there's Andy's walk. Andy has a limp because her left leg is not animating correctly. There you go. Okay, it's very robotic. But then what I can do is come in here and start tweaking stuff to get it to look like it. I don't use this as much of a reference for the arms because I kind of know what they're going to do, and then after that I can kind of tweak it. One thing I like to do is, as this arm is coming up, the real driver in this is not the hand, but if you look at it, that looks like what's happening is that the hand is actually like coming up. What I'm going to do is take this and straighten out the arm a bit as it's coming. Okay, now what you're going to see is that that arm is then going to look like it kind of flings up. Like you can see it kind of like fling itself up there because the bicep is what's moving it, and the rest of the forearm is just kind of like following along. Okay, I'm also looking to make sure that I'm not intersecting the body at all. Everything is good there, it's not. So I can go back and tweak this, maybe tweak the elbows if I need to, whatever. And then my last one I would do is the head. You'll see Andy's head is going from side to side to side. So I'd switch to the front view and I would just make sure that Andy stays pretty much locked on this entire time. So at frame 0, Andy's looking ahead. And we set a key. Frame 30, Andy's looking ahead. Frame 15, way off to the side. There we go. We'll set a key. Okay. So now if we look at this, it pretty much looks good, except for right here, there's like a weird, like Andy looks to the side real quick and then comes back. All right, so I go through and tweak that, modify the head, get it lined up. Then my next step in this is to go through and start to tweak these. Because I have all of my items kind of linked together, so here's all the stuff for head, here's all the keyframes for everything that's inside that head character set. If I switch to, if I switch this to lower body, here's all the stuff for lower body, okay? And what I can do is just go through here, once all my animation is done, is go through. Some of these are going to look like this, no animation on them at all. I didn't touch them. I may need them at some point, but not now. Other ones may look like this. So this one right here is my foot roll. So if I watch my foot roll, and this is the right foot roll, and I notice that something's not playing nicely with the right foot roll. Yeah, then I can go ahead and start tweaking this. But it looks like everything is good with that. Okay. I may get, like on my translate Y, no, not there, there it is. On my translate Y, it might make sense for me to delete some of these, or if I notice something like really out of place, like for some reason the translate Y does that. Okay, it shouldn't. His foot shouldn't go up, down again. That's like not something your foot should do. If you watch it, you'll see that his foot definitely like scrapes the ground about here, and then flings back up and then comes back down. So that looks like a really weird hiccupy kind of walk. Okay, so I may need to go through and tweak some of these graph points. So I recommend going through this and just verifying that all the graphs look nice and smooth, which is what they should do. Okay, you're going to get stuff like this, that's fine. Yep, even this is fine. I could go through and delete these because they're not really doing a whole lot, but I don't need to. I can leave that there. Okay. And I can also go through the upper body and then again verify that. Once I've gone through and I've set up the lower body, the legs are moving good, the upper body, the arms are moving good, the head, that's moving good, then I'm going to start to create a loop, okay? And this is the part that we haven't gone over yet. So under Animation Editor's Tracks Editor, I'm in the lower body right now. I'm going to go to Create Animation Clip. And I'm going to call this lower body. And then say apply. Now what this does is it creates a clip, okay? So it basically took all that animation and it drops it into this, which is a clip, which I could then move anywhere I want in my timeline. If I don't want Andy to walk until frame 600, I can just grab this and move it to 600, okay? Which is awesome. It basically just like groups everything together. So I'm going to do that for lower body. I'm going to do that for upper body. So I'm going to go to upper body. It disappears, but that's fine. It'll come back. And then I'm also going to do this for head. All right, so there we go. So head, lower body, and upper body are done. I'm going to switch my character sets to the Andy character set, and all three of them should load. There they are, Andy lower body, upper body, and head. And then what I can do with this is if I hit play, my animation is going to look exactly the same. So there's the same little limpy animation that I had before. If I go into here and I grab this and do that, it's actually taking that animation and then stretching out the entire thing. So if I needed Andy to walk slower for whatever reason, now Andy's going to walk slower. Okay, if I need Andy to walk faster, I can squeeze this. Here's my original start time is 30. I can squeeze this before 30, so let's say 20. There it goes. And so now Andy's walking a bit faster. So we're not dealing with keyframes anymore. We're dealing with these clips, and those clips are controlling the keyframes. Now where this becomes in a looping sense, let me reset this back to 30, is over here you'll see it says post cycle, and cycle just means loop. So if I set this to 10, now this is going to loop 10 times. So now if I go and add some more frames here, I hit play, you'll see that Andy is going to loop 10 times. Maybe I'll go 400 so we can actually see the loop. Okay, and he gets here and stops. Okay. Now if this were a video game, what I would do is I would have a walk cycle like this, I would have a jump cycle, I would have a whatever cycle, and then those could be fed into my gaming engine. Okay. Sweet. So what you're going to do is you've done all the animation, lower body, upper body, head, all done, cool. You've cycled them with the tracks editor, and then you're going to set up your scene. The ground in this one is not anywhere near big enough, so I'm just going to make this huge. And Andy's going to stay in one spot, so you're not actually physically moving Andy forward. You're going to set your cameras up so you have two cameras. So I'm going to switch this to layouts 2 side by side. I'm going to turn on my render view, turn on my render view. I'm going to make a new camera in each. Okay, so this camera here on the right side, this will be Andy front. And this one will be Andy side. So what I'm going to do is go to the front view here. Oops, make sure that my render view is on. make sure that my render settings are correct. So Andy always comes in rendering through Maya software, not sure why. So I'm going to set that to Arnold. I'm also going to set my width and height to 960 by 540. And I'm going to put front Andy on one side of my screen. And on the other side of my screen, I'm going to put side Andy. And the reason I do the two side by side is that way I can kind of get them about the same height. Like I don't want that Andy to be that small because that's weird. I can get them about the same height. And then these lines right here, I want this and this to line up. So I'm just going to rotate my camera until they about line up. There we go. So now I have front view and I have side view. I'll double check, make sure that Andy is visible in both of them the entire time, which she is. Just a little bit. I'm just going to click on my camera and just rotate it slightly, like -11. Nope, that's the wrong way. 4, nope, 2, wrong direction, 3, 2.5, that's the number, okay. And then I'm going to go through all of my other cameras and render this out. So I'd add lights to the scene, any textures. If you want to add something else in the background, you're free to do so. Where are my output settings? Display options? No. Oh, there it is. I'm going to turn off renderable on all my cameras except for my two new ones. So Andy front will be renderable, Andy side will be renderable. Okay, so those two are renderable. And in my render settings, you'll see that those two are now loaded. I need to rename this, so this will be Andy WalkCycle. And I'm going to put an underscore and then right click and say insert camera name. And then what that does is it saves each one of these things with the camera name added to it. That way it doesn't override the first one after it renders, or the second one after it renders it out. Name.number.extension. Frame range is 1 to 300 because we're going to do 300 frames of this just to verify it is a cycle. I'll take my settings up here. And you can add motion blur to this, you don't need to. And then that's it. Okay, so I would go through my rendering here, I would go to my render sequence, and instead of picking a camera, I would say all render enabled cameras. That way it renders both of my cameras out and I'm good to go. So I hit that button and it goes, okay? I don't need to save this, but I should probably save it just in case I need to reference it back. All right, now this is my Homer WalkCycle. And he's basically the Incredible Hulk in this version because it's a different texture material. There we go. Let's assign a me AI standard surface. There we go. Good enough for now. So there's his WalkCycle there. Now you'll see on this one that he's actually blinking. And this is, again, one of the cool things about that. I did not create a big loop of him blinking. What I did was I created a section of him blinking, and I duplicated that blinking pattern over and over and over again. Okay, so on the head character set, I made a, where's my track set? There it is. I made a blink. So if you look here, this is the blinking one. And basically I can just take this and copy it and then duplicate it. That's what I did. Well, there it is, yep. And then I can move this wherever I need to. So if I want Homer to blink right here, I just move it right there and then Homer blinks. So it's like amazing stuff. Now when you bring this into After Effects, you're going to import your footage just like you did before. So I would grab the front view, import it, grab the side view, import it. You'll get two different images here. You drag that onto your new comp. You say single, you do not sequence the layers, and you say okie dokie. And you'll see that one Homer or Andy or whoever will be on top of the other one. You'll notice too, like in this one, that line is almost perfect. Like you can see, he just needs to be just like adjusted a little bit, and I will. Okay, I need to cut this front one so that I see this other homer here. So I'm going to go to my shape, and I'm going to marquee a box around this homer. There it is. So that it only shows him, and now you'll see that he's lined up perfectly with where that is. So now when I hit play, there he goes. Now to get it to line up better, I'm just going to scoot him up. And I think that might be good enough if I just do that. Okay. I'm also going to go to the mask and put a little feather on it. And that will help blend in any edges. So it'll actually look like right now that both homers are walking on the same surface. And then I'll render it out. Okay? When you do your lighting, obviously make sure your lighting is good from both angles, right? So you don't want to just light one side of it and then the other side is completely dark. You don't want to light just the front and then this is dark. That's not a good thing. You want your walk cycle to be nice and smooth. Definitely look at reference, not only the still images, but actually like watch someone walk. Like here are those ones I was talking to you about. 100 different walks. Look at that. So there's a sassy walk. It's a dancer's walk. So here's another one. This is the male walk, and obviously this is a lot longer. So one cycle for this is a couple hundred frames. So we wouldn't use that, but as far as what it looks like, you can definitely use that. One of these, this one must be the right one. No, it's still like, there we go. So now you can take a look at something like this and see how long it actually takes for a walk cycle to happen in, you know, mature aged woman, angry female. Young adult dazed. Remember, somebody recorded these at one point and put them on YouTube. All right, so that'll be your next assignment, is to go through and do the walk cycle. Remember, don't overwrite your pose, your ready to pose one. You want to use that as your starting point, but then make sure you save it as a walk cycle so you don't ruin the original. All right, any questions on this yet?